They tell you inflation is confusing, that it's complicated, that prices are rising because of many factors. That confusion is not a bug, it's the feature. Because when inflation becomes hard to explain, hard to track, and hard to blame, someone always benefits. And it's rarely the people watching this video. Pause on that thought. Right now, inflation is no longer just an economic term. It's in grocery aisles, in rent contracts, in interest payments, in quiet arguments at kitchen tables about what to cut next. Yet despite how personal it feels, most people can't clearly answer one question. Who actually wins when inflation hits? Not who survives, not who copes, who benefits. Tonight, we're going to walk through that question slowly. No jargon, no shouting, no easy villains. Just the system, how it really works, and why confusion is its most valuable output. Let's start with the uncomfortable part. Inflation is not simply prices going up. That's the symptom, not the cause, not the mechanism, and definitely not the strategy. At its core, inflation is about purchasing power. How much claim your money gives you over real things: food, energy, housing, labor. When inflation rises, that claim shrinks. If your income doesn't rise at the same speed, you're poorer, even if your paycheck number looks bigger. Now here's the part most explanations glide past. Inflation does not hit everyone evenly. It never has, it never will. Some people experience inflation as pain, others experience it as leverage. The system doesn't just tolerate that difference, it depends on it. To see why, we need to rewind slightly. Modern economies are built on debt, not as a side feature, as a foundation. Governments borrow, corporations borrow, households borrow, banks create credit that becomes money. Debt is not neutral. It creates relationships of power. When you borrow, you promise future income. When you lend, you claim a piece of the future. Inflation quietly reshuffles that relationship, because inflation erodes the real value of debt. If you owe a fixed amount of money and prices rise, the debt becomes easier to pay back in real terms. You're repaying yesterday's promise with today's weaker money. So the first beneficiaries of inflation are simple: debtors. Governments are the largest debtors on earth, and they know exactly how inflation works. A government with high debt and moderate inflation is not panicking, it's managing. Inflation reduces the real burden of outstanding debt without passing a single law. No vote, no headline, no confrontation. The debt shrinks quietly. This is why periods of high public debt are often followed by tolerance for inflation. Not hyperinflation, not chaos, but enough inflation to do the math. Now think about who holds government debt. Pension funds, insurance companies, foreign governments, central banks. Many of them are paid back in nominal terms, fixed coupons, fixed maturities. Inflation shifts value away from those holders and back to the issuer. That's not an accident, that's arithmetic. But governments aren't the only winners. Large corporations with pricing power benefit enormously from inflation. Here's the trick. If a company can raise prices faster than its costs, inflation becomes profit expansion, not stress. Consumers blame inflation. Executives quietly call it margin opportunity. This is why during inflationary periods, you often see record corporate profits at the same time households feel squeezed. It feels contradictory. It's not. Inflation gives cover. If prices rise, no single company looks greedy. Everything is getting more expensive, so firms test how far they can push. Some can't, some can. Those who can become winners. Now let's talk about wages, because this is where confusion becomes crucial. Most people evaluate their financial health by nominal income, the number on the paycheck. If your salary goes up 5%, it feels like progress. But if inflation is 7%, you're going backward. Inflation turns real wage cuts into psychological illusions. You don't see the loss directly. You feel it slowly, through groceries, through rent, through why does my money not stretch anymore? This delay reduces resistance. It's much easier for a system to erode purchasing power gradually than to cut wages explicitly. That's another beneficiary of inflation confusion, any employer who can keep wage growth below price growth. Now zoom out. Financial markets. Asset prices respond differently to inflation than consumer prices. Stocks, real estate, commodities, these are not just affected by inflation, they are often inflation hedges. Inflation helps some borrowers and crushes others. If you locked in a low fixed-rate mortgage before inflation, your real housing cost falls over time. If you rely on variable-rate debt or credit cards, inflation paired with rate hikes is devastating. Same inflation, opposite outcomes. Again, confusion hides distribution. Now look at banks. Banks earn on spreads, the difference between what they pay for money and what they charge. In volatile inflationary environments, spreads often widen. Complexity increases reliance on intermediaries. That's good for institutions that understand the plumbing, bad for everyone else. This is not a conspiracy, it's structure. Now here's the quiet irony. Inflation narratives often blame consumers for spending too much. Demand is too strong. People saved too much. Households need to cool down, as if buying groceries is reckless behavior. This framing shifts responsibility away from monetary systems and onto individuals. Confusion, again. If inflation feels like your fault, you don't ask who designed the system. You adjust your behavior. You accept less. Over time, expectations reset. That's another hidden benefit. Inflation doesn't just change prices, it changes what people think is normal. Smaller portions, higher rents, more debt, less security. Slow changes are easier to absorb than shocks. Now let's step back. Long-term, inflation uncertainty does something dangerous. It erodes trust. Not trust in markets, trust in money itself. When people can't plan, they speculate. When savings feel unsafe, risk increases. When stability disappears, volatility becomes normal. This benefits those who thrive in volatility: traders, large institutions, entities with hedging tools and access. It hurts those who need predictability: families, workers, small businesses. So who benefits when inflation confuses everyone? Debtors with scale, asset holders, firms with pricing power, institutions with early information, systems that prefer quiet redistribution over explicit choices. And who doesn't? Those whose only asset is labor, those paid in fixed terms, those arriving late to the explanation. This brings us to the final, uncomfortable thought. Inflation confusion is not just tolerated, it's curated. Not always intentionally, not by a single actor, but by incentives aligned in the same direction. Clarity would force decisions. Decisions create backlash. Backlash disrupts systems. Confusion delays that moment. So the real question isn't whether inflation will come down or whether prices will stabilize. The real question is this: if inflation became fully understood by the people it affects most, would the system still work the same way? Or does it require confusion to survive?